Blackmagic's URSA CINE 12k is disruptive. Consider in how many areas this camera is groundbreaking. Resolution, 12k. Sensor technology, RGBW. It comes with 8 terabytes of storage. It has 10 gigabit network connectivity. It also has internal ND, a large format sensor, inbuilt screens, high frame rate recording. While those things are not groundbreaking by themselves, combining everything that we've just mentioned into a single package that only costs $15,000, that is groundbreaking. In this video, we're going to push the camera on a Spec Shoot in London, put the footage through its paces in DaVinci Resolve, but even better than that, we're going to do something that we've not seen anyone else do yet. Explain the technology that makes this camera unique. Perhaps the best place to start a conversation about the CINE 12k is whether or not anyone needs 12k. ARRI dominates high-end production with the Alexa. Both the LF and 35 top out at 4.6k. So according to the industry, 4.6k is more than enough. On the other hand, Sony and Red are also incredibly popular. Their flagship cameras are both 8k. So there's evidently demand for higher resolutions. There are genuine use cases for 12k. At the same time, there are benefits to shooting lower resolutions, for example, storage costs, and arguably, at the end of the day, is extra resolution worthwhile when you're using a soft anamorphic and you're shooting handheld? Here's the point. The URSA doesn't make you choose. Need high resolution? You got it. And when you don't need it, you can downscale the entire sensor to 8 and 4K shooting modes. This is kind of unusual in the world of cinema cameras. The Sony Venice shoots 8K open gate. It can downsample to 4K, but it can't record that image in its XOCN RAW codec because the image has already been demosaiced. Red cameras don't include any downsampling options. They just window when you choose lower resolutions. On the other hand, the URSA's 8 and 4K use the entire sensor. They still shoot in RAW, and it's incredibly easy to switch between these modes because no restarts are required. Why is it that the URSA can do this, but other cameras cannot or don't? Simply put, because it's hard. The URSA's ability is thanks in part to the camera's innovative color filter array. ARRI, Red, and Sony all use BAYER pattern sensors that have twice the number of green pixels as they do red or blue. That pattern repeats on a 2x2 grid. The URSA's color filter array repeats on a 6x6 grid. Half the photo sites are white, the other half are an equal number of red, green, and blue. This technology is complex, but it's actually easy to understand. Blackmagic are not the first to experiment with RGBW sensors. Traditional RGBW sensors are similar to the BAYER pattern, but simply exchange one of the green photo sites for a white one. As mentioned, the URSA's color filter array repeats on a 6x6 grid. Half the photo sites are white, the other half are an equal number of red, green, and blue. We'll call the R, G, and B photo sites narrowband. That's because the filter that sits in front only allows a narrow spectrum of colored light to reach the photo site. We'll call the white photo sites wideband, because as they lack a colored filter, a wide spectrum of light reaches them. White photo sites are advantageous because they improve the camera's low light performance and can increase dynamic range. You could say conservatively that 3 times the amount of light reaches a wideband photo site. Wideband photo sites are especially important on high-resolution sensors because as the pixel size decreases, so does the amount of light hitting each photo site. Color data for the white photo site can be extrapolated from the surrounding narrowband photo sites. Conversely, the luminance data from the wideband photo sites is used to enhance the dynamic range of the narrowband photo sites. One of the reasons RGBW sensors have been less popular than BAYER pattern sensors is the image processing complexity. They require more advanced and computationally intensive demosaicing algorithms to combine the white channel with the RGB data effectively. That's not really a problem anymore thanks to advances in technology. Many different RGBW color filter arrays have been developed and patented, but Blackmagic's is different. How and why? From what we can tell, Blackmagic's design has 2 distinct advantages. First, for a sensor of this pixel density, this camera has fantastic dynamic range. And second, it allows the camera's incredible in-sensor scaling. Let us explain. When working with a Bayer pattern sensor, if you want to shoot a lower resolution, there's two options. First, pixel skipping. That's where the camera misses entire rows or lines of pixels when scanning the image. It results in a quicker sensor readout with a lower resolution, but it introduces aliasing and moire to the image. Imagine if a fine detail in the image fell on one of the rows or lines that was being skipped. It's particularly noticeable on patterns with fine details that repeat, like fabric. The other way to get a lower resolution image is with downsampling. That's where the camera reads out the entire full resolution sensor, but then uses a processor to rescale the image. Because cameras are handheld and run on batteries, their hardware and processes need to be optimized. Those compromises are also why camera reviewers will rigorously test all the resolution outputs that a camera offers to see if any are compromised by poor processing. Back to the URSA 12k. If you look carefully at its filter layout, you'll notice that the wideband photo sites are distributed evenly. So are the narrowband photo sites, but they are arranged in diagonal pairs. For example, each red photo site always has a sister red photo site diagonally nearby. Thus, the sensor is broken up into macro cells. Each macro cell contains an even number of wideband photo sites and 2 matching narrowband photo sites. When shooting in 12K, the camera reads out each pixel individually. It takes about 12 milliseconds to read out all 96 million photo sites. It then uses a proprietary filter kernel to demosaic those pixels to produce a full color image. When shooting in 8K mode, the 2 narrowband photo sites in each macro cell are paired together, as are the 2 wideband photo sites. This is done at a hardware level. As a result, when processing each macro cell, instead of the camera having to read 4 individual values, it only has to read 2. This is why the sensor readout is twice as quick when the camera is working in 8K mode. The camera is reading half the number of pixels. In technical documentation, this process is called pixel binning. That might make it sound like sensor data is being discarded, but it's not. Nothing is being thrown away. The value of 2 different photo sites is being summed together before being sent onwards. Blackmagic's unique color filter array makes pixel binning possible. On other RGBW or BAYER sensors, matching photo sites are not adjacent, therefore making pairing impractical. Let's just deal with a common misconception. If the camera is reading half the number of pixels, does that mean it's now half the resolution? No. Halving the number of pixels decreases the overall resolution by the square root of 0.5, so about a 0.7 decrease in resolution. When the sensor is in that mode, it's super easy for the camera to extract both a high quality 8K RAW image and a high quality RAW 4K image. It makes sense because that 6x6 filter pattern is now made up of a grid of 3 macro cells by 3 macro cells. 4 and 8 both divide into 12 with factors that are a derivative of 3. A different filter kernel will be used to process the 4K image and a different one to process the 8K image. This is absolutely huge because thanks to this incredible technology, this camera can deliver an uncompromised 4, 8 and 12K image from the same sensor. Here's the point. While this camera has 12K featured prominently in its name, thanks to its incredible technology, it's equally as capable as an 8 or a 4K camera. You could even argue that it's more capable as an 8K camera, given the fact that the pixel pairing technology dramatically reduces sensor readout, enables higher frame rates, improves the sensor's signal-to-noise ratio, and provides better low light and dynamic range performance. This camera lets you choose. For everyone that will say, "But I don't need 12K," Blackmagic sees you and has already provided the solution. You can think of this technology as being like a 3-speed gearbox. A car might be able to rev up to 7,000 RPM or go 120 miles per hour. The truth is that most of the time, you don't need that sort of speed or those sorts of revs. The gearbox converts that power into something useful that you can use at lower speeds. If you think all of that sounds complex, can we just remind you of how complex and problematic demosaicing Bayer filters is? Just because it's the most common CFA doesn't mean that it's the best or it's perfect. It's exciting to see a camera manufacturer innovate and do something different in a market where everyone copies each other. There's no other camera that offers such a wide range of uncompromised resolution options. If you're wondering how we know all of this, we had to work it out for ourselves. Our breakdown of this technology is based on the publicly available patent filed by Blackmagic, so you can work all of this out for yourself. There's a link in the description. It's not light reading, but the information is there.
This video is supported by Audiio. If you want to use their amazing library of music and sound effects in your project, you could purchase a yearly license. Or if you never want to have to worry about music licensing costs ever again, you can purchase lifetime access. Normally that would cost $499, but using our discount code Team2Films199, you can get lifetime access for, you guessed it, just $199. That is an amazing deal. As well as the thousands of tracks already in the library, you'll get access to all the new tracks that continue to be added weekly, amazing AI features like Link Match and Hans AI that help you to find tracks by either describing what you're looking for or providing references of similar tracks that you like. And finally, you can download stems for every single track that allows you to more easily remix them. Using our discount code and supporting our sponsors is an excellent way of supporting our channel. Thanks so much for watching.
Now, all of this innovation is only worthwhile if it produces a good image. How about we look at some footage? CVP and ProAV have already put out fantastic videos about this camera. I'd recommend you watch their videos too, because they've covered ground that we won't cover in this video. Throughout our tests, we've been pairing the camera with Tokina Vista Primes, lenses known for their incredible sharpness, and we are pairing the camera with SWIT 28-volt B-mount batteries. We'll start with something that clearly plays to the camera's strengths. These incredibly bright exteriors allow us to not only run the camera at its lowest ISO, but also to stop the lenses down for maximum sharpness. In 12K mode, it's possible to zoom into 300% without losing resolution on a UHD or 4K timeline. It's basically 1-to-1 pixels right now. Despite these incredibly fine patterns on the distant buildings, the sensor exhibits no moire or aliasing. The image is so sharp that it's possible to zoom beyond 1-to-1 pixels, in this instance all the way to 600%, and still get an acceptable image. That is impressive. In the 8K mode, you can zoom into 200% without losing resolution on a UHD timeline. And again, there's no evidence of moire or aliasing when the sensor is in this mode. Finally, here's the 4K mode. It's already at 1-to-1 pixels, but if I zoom in beyond that and blow up the image, again, it's still impressively sharp. On a UHD timeline, they look identical. That's a good thing. Remember that all three of these clips use the same codec, it's just the resolution that's different. At 200%, it is obvious that the resolution of the 4K has been exceeded, but it holds up surprisingly well. The difference is very much apparent at 400%. In the 12K, the Shepherd Brewery sign is clearly visible. Individual bricks can be seen on the wall. Individual iron bars can be seen on the balcony. In the 8K, while the pub's name is still clearly readable, the brewery sign becomes challenging to read. In the 4K, there are clearly visible artifacts from having blown up the clip so much. The brewery name is completely unreadable, and any remaining details in the railings have now disappeared. As you can see, there are meaningful differences between each resolution, and it's incredible to see how much detail each retains. In general, the biggest difference is seen between the 12 and 8K modes. In some instances, the difference between 8 and 4K is hard to discern, but it's highly dependent on the details being presented in the image. What's really bananas is that this camera will shoot 80 frames per second at 12K open gate. That increases to 168 frames per second in 8K 16:9 mode. So you can do stuff like this. To focus solely on these extreme technical achievements does the camera a disservice, because it's not a specialty camera, it's a capable workhorse. To put it to the test, we arranged a model for a sort of fashion style shoot. The weather was overcast and we spent a considerable amount of time indoors in very low light. The majority of the shots are at 3200 ISO, and these scenes have a lot of dynamic range, so it's going to be an interesting test. A camera lives or dies by its footage. So we showed an actual proper colorist the footage from our shoot to get their thoughts. Here's our conversation.
I'm Tashi Trieu. I'm a colorist. I work on movies ranging from small indie short films all the way up to some of the biggest feature films ever made.
Is 12K a gimmick? Is it something that is actually genuinely useful in production?
I think that's going to vary on the production. I think that there are going to be cases where in a visual effects context, you're going to want as much resolution as you possibly can, and you're going to make use of that in some way, whether or not you're producing a 2K VFX render at the end of the day or a 4K render. Having that extra resolution could be useful for a variety of reasons. Projects that I did years ago where they started shooting on the red at 6K, but they might frame for the 5K center extraction of that, and we take that and we down-res that to 4K. So we're oversampling for 4K just a little bit, but we're shooting with this extra padding margin. That way they just have it, and that can be the difference between that first take where they love the performance, but Steadicam was a little bit wonky. They can fix that, not compromise the framing, and keep that performance that they love.
One of the things that we thought was especially interesting is the ability that it has to output at different resolutions. Other cameras do have the ability, but that usually comes with a set of inherent limitations.
It's very unusual because every other camera that offers multiple recording formats is doing it by windowing. That's a compromise that to shoot at a higher frame rate or to shoot at a lower resolution for some sort of cost savings, you're now losing field of view. For me, anytime we're doing something that is not windowing, my concern is always going to be moire and aliasing, what kind of disadvantages we have because of that. This camera's unique architecture is really compelling because it avoids all that.
When you look at the footage, is there anything that you see in it that you feel is compromised?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the shots you shot for resolution comparison, the city landscapes, that's where I would expect to start to see moire and artifacts and aliasing, especially any kind of diagonal or curved lines like the suspension wires for like the bridge or any of the more organic architectural shapes. Like that's where I would expect to start to see that sort of stuff. But I didn't really notice issues there. You can absolutely engineer tests that highlight the failures of any technology, whether it's a display or an encoding scheme or a camera or optics. You can always engineer something there, but like what you did there was a pretty challenging scene in a number of ways, and also a pretty representational scene. Like it doesn't get too much more urban than that. They presented realistic challenges, and I think it held up for that.
Now we're talking about BAYER sensors. It's worth remembering that in the early years of digital, 3 CMOS or 3 CCD chips were the norm. They use a prism to split the image into a separate red, green, and blue record. That was the standard.
When BAYER came out, if you have a BAYER sensor that's only 4096 wide, well, you don't really have 4,000 red, green, and blue photo sites. So what is resolution becomes a real conversation there. And there were a lot of purists who said, like, that's not good enough. That's not detailed enough. For all the hemming and hawing, we've been producing some pretty good looking movies. And perhaps that's the ultimate argument for oversampling.
My take here. So one of the things that people often forget about 12K is that it's not necessarily about providing a 12K deliverable. More often than not, it's about producing a better quality 4 or 8K deliverable. And that kind of oversampling is something that has been standard practice for a long time. Now we get to talk about the camera's noise. There's some shots of Natalie. They are definitely at 200 ISO.
Yeah, and that's really crystal clear. Yeah, even at like 1:1 pixels, it's very clean. The last two shots, like this is where like camera noise, I started to notice that, and I think these are shot at 3200 ISO. But I'd say it's completely usable footage. You could certainly do worse. If you can denoise it ever so slightly and then regrain it in a way that's consistent with your project, then great. With a very slight bit of noise reduction, it looks pretty good.
How does the grain compare then to something like a Venice or an Alexa?
People have decided for whatever reason that Alexa noise is more filmic than other noise. I'm I'm not sure if I see that or if I get that. I think that there's so many more important things about picking a camera. Like if you're at that point where your choice between two cameras comes down to the noise profile of them at high ISOs, you've solved every other production challenge. The problems of recording media, you've resolved the physical constraints of the camera. Far more important, I think, is the ergonomics of it.
I fully appreciate the footage that we shot isn't necessarily an objective evaluation of the camera's dynamic range. I know that the Cine 12k doesn't have the same dynamic range that a Venice and Alexa does, but it gets fairly close, right?
It feels pretty good. It's really just that one shot that I brought up where I thought that the lights on the ceiling were just a little bit clippy. That's the only one where I noticed anything. Everything else felt fairly organic, you know.
Where's the line between that being bad cinematography?
Well, I don't know if it's bad cinematography. I mean, you don't have complete control of the environment, and to replace all those lights to stop them down like half a stop or a stop, like that's not practical. Things are going to clip at some point. That's just, you know, a natural thing. It's just whether it clips in an elegant way or a way that you can use. You know, that's really what matters. And I think that this footage is great because this is a variety of real world tests that are probably a little more interesting than dynamic range comparison. Like someone can do that all day long and like, sure, if that helps inform your decision about something, great. I think that if the difference is between a camera with 15 stops or 16 stops, like I don't know if that meaningfully changes the way you're going to light something, assuming you have such high precision control over that environment or your lighting that you can do that precise of lighting at that high dynamic range.
Next, we moved on to talking about the trade-offs that you have to make when choosing a camera or budgeting for a project.
There's always a cost trade-off. There's going to be the ultra high end. If you're on a $300 million budget, you can afford whichever camera you want. So pick the best one that checks all the other boxes that you need it to check. But if you're remotely budget conscious, you know, there has to be some sacrifice, but is it a meaningful sacrifice or is it inconsequential, or does it work for 95% of people? I don't think anyone thinks that they've made the camera that's perfect for everyone. Obviously, an Alexa isn't perfect for everyone because it's not affordable or attainable for everyone.
Does the perfect camera exist?
I don't think so. I think that people want it to exist, and that's why there's been a lot of confirmation bias about cameras. It's a disservice to compare every camera to a specific camera as a gold standard. You need to look at what do these cameras do individually in relationship to your project. There are a lot of people in production around the world who don't work the way that Hollywood feature films do. They are persistent businesses where they need to shoot something reliably the same way every day for years on end, rather than each production being a small business that starts up, shoots for a couple months, and then collapses. It's a different model. So it could be the perfect camera for somebody in a different market too.
Is the Cine 12k good enough?
I don't think that there's anything about it that's standing out as a deal breaker to me. It seems like this is a responsibly produced camera with a lot of great features. Now, I haven't touched it, so from an ergonomic standpoint, I don't know what issues that presents or what practical logistical limitations are. But from, you know, purely a post-production finishing, you know, colorist standpoint, this seems like a completely viable camera. No camera is about being perfect out of the gate. It's just giving you what you need that you can then affordably shape into what you want it to be later.
A big thank you to Tashi for being so kind as to offer his thoughts. We're not going to cover every facet of this camera, but here's some features we feel deserve some time. This camera has a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, which can be used not only to control the camera using Blackmagic's REST API, but to access all the media recorded to the media module. If you're working in a controlled environment, that means you can watch rushes while the camera is being used to shoot, and then offload footage without ever removing the media module. The camera can be run on 14 or 28 volt batteries. Higher frame rates are only accessible when using 28 volt batteries. We're using Swit's HB A290B batteries. I can tell you how long the camera will last on one of these because the screen on the OLED continuously calculates the amount of runtime left. As you can see, fully charged, they will run the camera for over 3 hours. These batteries feature 2 DTAP ports. They're regulated to 14 volts. It also has 2 USB ports, A and C. The battery can provide 60 watts of power delivery via that USB-C port. We love how versatile that makes this battery. If you're on set using a laptop, this will completely charge a MacBook Pro 16-inch from 0 to 100 twice and still have power to spare. The USB-C port works both ways. You can use it to power other devices, but you can also use it to charge the battery. This means you don't need to carry a bulky B-mount charger around. This 120 watt gallium nitride charger, also from SWIP, can charge 2 batteries simultaneously at 60 watts each. We use SWIP batteries on all of our equipment, including V-mount, BPU, and now B-mount. All of them charge via USB-C. Finally, I'm using this awesome hot swap plate. It's also from SWIP. It's got capacitors inside that charge when a battery is connected. When you remove the battery, it will keep the camera and accessories powered while you mount the replacement. This handy display tells you how many seconds of power you have left before you need to get the new battery mounted. Not only does this prevent video transmitters or wireless lens controllers from losing power and having to reconnect, but given that this camera has network connectivity, well, that means it might be in the middle of uploading footage to the cloud, or a DIT might be accessing the camera's media. This hot swap plate stops them from being disrupted by a simple battery change. It's a very cool piece of tech that just works. A surprise hit for us was the assistant camera screen on the other side of the camera. It's the feature we never knew we wanted in a camera. With an EVF, the fold-out screen, and the second display, this camera very quickly became a hub for creative discussion on our shoot. Because without any additional equipment, it's possible for 2 or 3 people to see an image without invading each other's personal space. We love the AC screen so much that we want more of it. It would be nice if it could tilt up and down to make it easier to use when the camera is low or high. The only issue we had is that we kept on fighting over who got to push record at the beginning and end of a take. The URSA's included rigging is very high quality. I love this quick release mechanism for the RE dovetail. It has a safety latch to prevent accidental disconnects. Now, it is a heavy camera. No, it doesn't fit on an RS4 gimbal. Weight and size is not a disadvantage though, as it adds stability and inertia to the camera, the benefits of which are very visible in footage. And it helps the camera balance better with weighty professional lenses like these Tokina Vista Primes. Finally, we'll echo comments others have made. We're really looking forward to Blackmagic producing a single bay card reader. We'd DIY one, but I'm not confident that this would work. Who is this camera for? Its price encourages you to compare it to something like an FX9 or C400. After all, once you've added media and screens, you've got to ask yourself, why would I buy one of those when I could have one of these? Of course, there are reasons why you'd definitely choose a camera like the FX9 or C400. On the other hand, spec-wise, it's clearly aimed at high-end narrative, commercial and doc. So clearly, it should be compared to the RE Alexa, Sony Venice and Red V Raptor. You know, there's lots of different ways to compare these cameras. When considering specs, make sure you compare them properly. For example, when comparing the URSA to the Venice, it's more appropriate to consider the URSA's specs when it's in its 8K mode because the resolution matches. The URSA can produce 4K from the entire sensor. Well, the Alexa already shoots 4K-ish, so that's a moot point. But the Venice and Raptor can't easily shoot lower resolutions, especially without windowing or compromising the codec that they're using. And don't forget, the URSA goes all the way up to 168 frames per second in 16:9 8K mode. That beats the Alexa and Raptor. In traditional tests, the URSA's dynamic range exceeds the Raptor, but it's slightly behind the Venice, and like the rest of the industry, trails the Alexa too. However, it should be noted that thanks in part to its white photo size, the B-RAW highlight recovery feature does a stunning job of restoring detail and producing a pleasing highlight transition on those rare occasions when you do get clipping. When comparing price, don't forget the URSA comes with media and 2 monitors, whereas neither the Alexa, Venice or V-Raptor come with any monitors. Consider this. Red charges $300 per 1 terabyte card, so 8 terabytes of media will cost you $2,400. A single codex drive for an RE Alexa costs $1,620-ish, so 8 terabytes of media is going to cost around $13,000. Now, take a seat, because Sony charges $4,000 per 1 terabyte AXS memory card. You'll need to spend a whopping $32,000 to get 8 terabytes of storage. When you include a similar amount of media, an EVF, and monitor, here's the true cost of all 4 systems compared. You can get 2 entire Cine 12k cameras with 8 terabytes of media on both for the price of just your media for the Venice 2. Let that sink home. What's the point? Is the Alexa, Venice, or V-Raptor a better camera? Maybe, but does it matter? The better question to ask is whether they are worth the extra money when you can get a fully kitted URSA 12K with 8 terabytes of storage for just $15,000. For some people, the answer will be yes. For everyone else, that's food for thought. Make no mistake, this is a high-end camera aimed at prestige productions, but its price means it will appeal to a broad range of customers who value its quality and flexibility. There's a lot to think about here. If you're working in high-end narrative or doc, would you rather buy a single Venice 2 or an RE35, or a fleet of URSA 12Ks? Or on the other end of the spectrum, as long as size and weight is not an issue for the kind of work you do, could the URSA's incredible feature set tempt you away from something like a C400 or Sony Burano? It's always good to caveat comparisons like these so that they don't get taken out of context. The Venice 2 and RE35 are incredible cameras and worth their cost. There are many scenarios where they would be the better choice, despite the added cost. And of course, cameras like the C400 or FX9 are again incredible cameras. There are many scenarios where they are definitely the better choice. But man, that feature set and that price really does make you stop and think. Some people are already talking about how the next generation of this camera might evolve. People are doing that with the Pixis too, but those conversations are kind of irrelevant because you can say those things about any camera. The C400 is a great camera, and I'm sure the C400 Mark II will be better. We don't have that yet. The URSA CINE 12k is the best camera that Blackmagic have ever produced, and it will be until they make an even better one. Most cameras seem to be compromised, great at this, but not so good at that. The URSA doesn't seem to have any compromises. It has everything and then some more. And it does all of that for under $15,000. That is crazy. But don't take our word for it. Go check this camera out yourself. Go watch ProAV and CVP's excellent videos on the CINE 12k and let us know in the comments what you think of this camera. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, consider sharing it with someone. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Check out our sponsor Audiio. Right now you can get an entire year's subscription for just $60, and you get access to amazing features like Hands AI to help you find the right music. And if you're interested in purchasing this camera or any of the equipment that we've featured in this video, please get in touch with our friends at ProAV if you're in Europe, or Film Tools if you're in the US, and tell them that we sent you. Thanks so much for watching.